lay down some fire if you had to.
This is the voice of one of Britain's most dangerous criminals, plotting to break out from his jail cell. A cold-blooded gunman who shot a British policeman as he begged for his life.
He's taken everything away from me. He took away my whole world.
A fugitive who stopped at nothing to evade justice.
He was prepared to go to any means and any lengths to prevent being caught.
A prisoner locked up forever, but determined to force his way out.
He would kill anybody to get where he wants to go, which puts him a threat above any other prisoner I ever met in prison.
Boxing Day 2003, and much of Britain was quiet as millions of people celebrated the Christmas holidays. But not everyone, of course, has time off. In Leeds, 2 police officers said goodbye to their families and came to work here at Killingbeck Police Station. They were PC Neil Roper, and by his side, his friend and colleague, PC Ian Broadhurst.
He loved being around people and he loved helping people. And then when he went into traffic, that was him. He was absolutely ecstatic about it. He was so happy because that's where he wanted to be.
The 2 officers were expecting a relatively easy shift, and no one could possibly have imagined what they were about to face.
Ian got up to go to work, and just as usual, and he told me he loved me and gave me a kiss, and that was it. He just walked out the door.
We came on duty and it was a case of we expected a reasonably quiet day, bank holiday. We went out on patrol not long after we'd been in.
The officers were patrolling the east side of Leeds. It was a journey that took them down Dib Lane, a suburban street with a few shops scattered among the houses.
It was a case of just going out and, you know, bank holiday. If anything were serious at front of you, you'd deal with it.
These are the actual pictures from the patrol car camera, usually used for capturing speeding motorists. But now it's about to record a murder. The officer's car spins round to check a black BMW with what looked like a fake tax disc. The driver was sat at the wheel, reading the Racing Post.
And then it was a case of talking to him. If it had been all right, the tax disc would have probably carried on and gone on his merry way. We've gone out at car, had a look at the tax disc, and then Ian asked him to come and sit back in the car. He put the window down and put him behind him.
PC Roper then radioed the control room, who confirmed his suspicions.
He's done it again. That was a stolen one from November last year.
The officers arrested the driver and told him he was heading for the station. What they didn't know was that this man was more than a simple car thief. He was David Bieber, an American fugitive wanted for murder. He'd been on the run for almost a decade. Now calling himself Nathan Wayne Coleman, he'd already gone to extraordinary lengths to avoid the police.
My hair started going up on my back because of his mannerisms. He was a bit too smooth, if you see me point, and his eyes were a bit starey. So, let's have that tape on.
Everything's been said in this car is being taped at this present time, all right? So...
Now the car's recording equipment wasn't just taping the images, it was capturing the sound too.
So, as my mate's told you, under arrest because that vehicle's stolen in a burglary. So, obviously he's told you that. So, where are you from, please? Are you from Leeds?
Leeds, yeah.
What's your country of birth, then?
And it wasn't only the driver's attitude that was making the officers nervous.
It was just the way he was sat, his jacket was hanging forward, and it was just like there's something there, but you don't want to look.
What have you got in your coat pockets, though? Have you got anything that you shouldn't have in your coat pockets? What I'm saying is I just want to see what's in your coat pockets, and obviously for my safety more than yours, because obviously I've got my back to you, haven't I? We are entitled to handcuff you, so it's up to you.
I just knew in my head there was something there, because I didn't want to empty his pockets out, so it was a case of he has to be searched. Once it's mentioned of them handcuffs, then he's not going to like it probably, and then we're going to have his hands full, so it was a case asking for some backup.
We don't like the look of him at this time, so...
I'm just letting you know I did not steal the car.
The control room sent out the nearest officer available, PC James Banks. At Dib Lane, Neil Roper got out to help the recovery truck take the BMW away. That left his colleague, PC Broadhurst, alone inside with the increasingly anxious driver.
Can you roll this window down a bit? I'm just claustrophobic.
I don't think they come down, to be honest.
Pardon?
PC Broadhurst can be heard whistling and tapping his pen in an attempt to keep the driver calm.
You have to try and make it look like everything's calm and, you know, try and be friends with them, if you see my point.
A few minutes later, PC James Banks arrives, parking his car where the BMW had been. It was time for Neil Roper and Ian Broadhurst to handcuff their suspect.
Ian got out of the front passenger seat and I went to open the back door, trying to put his foot out, which is obviously the door's open, I'm getting out type.
Stop there, mate. Stop there. Because we're transporting you, we haven't put handcuffs on you, all right?
No, I got...
Claustrophobic? Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you can't sit behind us when we've...
I leant in with the handcuffs. I took my handcuffs off and then as I leant in, there's a gun coming up.
Listen,
Not
listen,
with
man,
that.
don't!
Of the 5 shots fired, 2 hit Ian Broadhurst. The second at point-blank range as he lay on the ground. Then, all that can be heard is the clicking of the tape machine.
First bullet hit me in the back, which made me nearly fall down. It was like my leg nearly went. And then it was a case of grab your radio and just let everybody know what's happening.
I've been shot twice. I don't know about Ian, he's down on the floor.
167, that's received. We will get you an ambulance.
Can't tell you anything else. I've been shot twice. I don't know what's going on. I've got one through the back.
I didn't even look round. I wasn't exactly running, it was a case of just getting away best I could. But I suppose it's a case of, well, panic, adrenaline. You just keep going. Went out back of the old people's home and there was a big sheet of glass window and the door was locked and I were, you know, you half contemplate ever try and jump through this window. But I wouldn't have managed it. But luckily he didn't follow me because he was on his merry way.
The driver shot Neil Roper in the back twice. He shot James Banks once, but remarkably, the bullet hit his radio. A passerby found Ian fighting for his life by the roadside.
Get an ambulance!
She grabbed his radio and tried desperately to summon help.
Hello? All right, I'm a nurse. Have you got any help? Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me?
I've got nothing. I've just come out of taxi.
Right, where's... Can you hear me?
Make taxi.
Paramedics and passers-by fought to save Ian's life, but he died on his way to hospital.
I couldn't take it in at all. I think I started screaming. I don't even think there are any words to describe how I felt. I was absolutely heartbroken. I was in shock. I couldn't even describe that feeling to you. Of somebody coming in and telling you that that had happened to somebody you love.
The response was instant and massive, but the killer was used to violence and had escaped the police before. Would he be caught before someone else got hurt?
He was quite calmly coming back to the city where he committed this murder, arming himself to the teeth with ammunition. He was prepared to go to any means and any lengths to prevent being caught, and that worried us greatly.
On Boxing Day 2003, a full-scale murder hunt was underway. A suspected car thief had shot at 3 policemen who had tried to arrest him. One, PC Ian Broadhurst, was dead. Another, Neil Roper, was fighting for his life in hospital. Senior officers had sent forensic teams to comb the murder scene. But amid all the activity, there was disbelief.
Immense shock. No officer had been murdered whilst on duty for over 20 years.
Detective Chief Superintendent Chris Gregg was the senior officer on call.
We knew from almost the first minutes that this was as serious as it gets. We had got some great potential here. We'd got the stolen car where the suspect had been sat in reading the Racing Post. We'd got items in the car that we thought, in all probability, the killer has been handling.
The officers found 2 objects they knew the killer had touched. A chocolate wrapper in the back of the police car, and on the front seat of the BMW, the same newspaper that PC Neil Roper had seen him reading. Fingerprint experts began tests on the paper, hoping it would be the key to solving the case.
Inside, you've got a left forefinger on the inside of the page, and then you've got the left thumb.
John Dixon was in charge of the search.
It just shows that it's consistent with him flicking through the newspaper and reading it.
The killer had left his marks all over the paper. But would these prints be held on file?
You've got a case where you've got lots of fingerprints that we can actually program into the computer and search against the database. You get a feeling, think, well, if they're actually on there, this should really turn up. We should actually get this guy.
Dozens of officers searched thousands of prints, but every one came back negative. Hopes of finding a match were fading.
Most of the time you were thinking, oh, well, next one will do it, the next one will do it, the next one will do it. But after a long time, you start thinking, well, to be honest, it looks as if this person isn't recorded.
But the officers were convinced the killer would have a criminal history. What they didn't know was where.
He knew how to handle that gun. He hit under that stress, that anxiety, with every shot he fired. So we thought this person has got to have some either previous criminal history with a firearm or some military background. He's got to have had some training somewhere. And if this wasn't in the UK, then it had to be somewhere wider afield.
The prints were sent around the world in the hope that the killer would be found. Back in Leeds, those closest to Ian were still struggling to come to terms with his death. His widow, Eilish, wanted to visit the place where he was shot.
It's not a nice place at all. Nobody should die there. And that is where my husband fell.
Meanwhile, Neil Roper awoke in hospital. to be told the heartbreaking news.
Just completely shocking, you know, you don't know what to think, really. What can you think? Your mate's been shot, and he's died, like.
All I wanted to do was see Neil, to see if he was okay. And that was it. I just wanted to see if he was all right.
You don't know what to think, you just... You know, because of what I've done, her husband died, so...
The two of us just kind of sat and looked at one another because there were no words that we could say to one another for what had happened the night before, because it was so unreal.
By day 2 of the investigation, the police were building a clearer picture of the gunman.
Can you roll this window down a bit? I'm just close to it. No, I did not steal the car.
They already had his voice from the patrol car and knew he had a North American accent.
Are you sure it's coming out stolen?
Now they were about to get a face to go with it. This fuzzy CCTV footage from Dib Lane showed a man buying a copy of the Racing Post just minutes before the shooting. The police felt this had to be the killer.
We had to put all the information out that we possibly could to the public because we felt that we needed the public's help here. We had to really hit the decks running with this. We were checking a lot of people out. We were checking our known criminals out, trying to find that piece of information that could give us the name to go with the killer.
The press conference paid dividends. It prompted a call from the public and, crucially, a name: Nathan Wayne Coleman.
The caller gave us the name Nathan, together with a mobile phone number, and said that Nathan, being a registered doorman, had a black BMW and had been trying to get a gun. We'd got something to go on now.
As well as getting a name, detectives quickly got an address. This police video shows officers breaking into what they believed was the killer's flat. Inside, the rooms were untidy, but amongst the mess, there were some vital clues. A bulletproof vest, bodybuilding supplements, a doorman's suit. More importantly, there were bank cards and correspondence, the name on them, Nathan Wayne Coleman. There remained just one piece of outstanding evidence that would link the flat's owner to Ian Broadhurst's murder.
We wanted to find fingerprints in that flat that we could connect to the BMW, and those results came through at about 2 o'clock that morning. Now we've identified the person. The next step is to find him.
Officers recovered Nathan Coleman's doorman's license. This is the photo they took from it. For the first time, they had a clear picture of the killer's face. The police were getting closer, but would they catch him before he hurt someone else?
It was an investigation that had to move at such a pace because we knew that, you know, it was a life and death situation here, and this was as serious as it gets.
So how long is this going to... Am I going to be gone all night then?
Dozens of people contacted the police to say they thought they knew the gunman, but one caller stood out.
I heard the name Nathan Coleman. It just instantly rung a bell.
David Costello worked at Spacemakers, a large storage facility just 2 miles from the murder scene. Here, detectives got their clearest indication yet of just how dangerous their fugitive was.
Instantly got on the computer system here, just made sure that Nathan Coleman was one of the people that stored here. When we did the check on the security system then, it came to light he'd actually turned up the day before. So I just rang the police straight away.
The killer had rented a lock-up unit at Spacemakers, and it was home to a deadly store. This CCTV footage showed the killer, who had now dyed his hair, calmly paying a visit just 2 days after the shooting. When officers opened the unit, they realised how prepared he was to use violence again. It was packed with shells, gunpowder, and a press for making bullets, a homemade arsenal in waiting.
He was quite calmly coming back to the city where he committed this murder, arming himself to the teeth with ammunition. And why? Why was he doing this? We could think for only one reason. He was prepared to go to any means and any lengths to prevent being caught, and that worried us greatly.
Detectives now knew he was armed and willing to kill again. They also knew that time was running out. As they searched, the killer was looking for someone who could help him flee from Britain.
I heard there was an American looking for me who wouldn't give his name, and he was coming around all the clubs that asking for me.
Piers Coyle is a bouncer who worked the doors with Nathan Coleman for almost a year.
He was actually coming wanting me to help him escape, all due to a conversation we had several years previous of how you could escape from England if you had to. He didn't really tell me that much about his life in America, but when he did, it constantly contradicted himself every time he talked. It was almost as if he was trying to build a history for himself.
But as 2003 came to a close, that history finally caught up with Ian Broadhurst's killer. Everything pointed to a criminal past. And 4 days after the shooting, all the pieces finally fell into place, thousands of miles away.
We got information from the FBI that they'd identified the fingerprints from that stolen BMW as David Bieber, a man who they wanted for a murder in 1995.
What's your country of birth then?
Canada.
Bieber had lied during his arrest. He wasn't from Canada. He was from much further south. "5,000 miles from Leeds is Florida's Gulf Coast, the real birthplace of David Bieber. Here, amid the glorious beaches and endless sunshine, Ian Broadhurst's murderer had already had a deadly impact.
Dave Bieber was as calm and cool as he could be.
As a teenager, Bobby Ammons attended the high school, where Bieber was a sports hero. But he later watched as his friend became addicted to bodybuilding, allowing steroids to take over his life. Bieber later joined the Marines, but quickly realized it wasn't for him.
He's never really been great on authority. He went AWOL like 15 times just to go to Vegas so he could gamble and have fun. When he would come back, he would not listen to anybody. Didn't matter what kind of authority. I mean, he used to sleep in his classes in the Marines. He wouldn't listen to what anybody said. So think about being shouted at and they're told to do this, and I'm not doing it. And he just doesn't do it.
Bieber may not have taken orders well, but it seemed he was more comfortable giving them. In February 1995, he was suspected of arranging the murder of a fellow bodybuilder and steroid dealer. Marcus Mueller was found with gunshots to his head and stomach by his girlfriend, Danielle Labelle. This is the 911 call that followed.
Do you need the ambulance? Oh, he's already dead. Are you in the same room with him? Yes. Is he breathing? No, he's dead. He's been dead for a while. Somebody shot him like an hours ago or yesterday. They shot him in the face.
When I got in there and I looked at Marcus, Marcus was a massive man. He was huge. And he was laid on his back right there at the foyer of the front door.
Lieutenant Barry Futch was one of the first officers on the scene.
It was obvious that he had just come up and answered the door and was shot there. That's the only way it could have happened. There was no sign of any struggle. There was nothing that happened.
Inside the house, police found steroids and guns. Outside sat David Bieber.
I talked to David for a little bit. He didn't really have much to say, but he was just sitting there. There was something wrong with this whole scenario.
A love of bodybuilding had made Bieber and Mueller friends, but they'd recently fallen out over their illegal steroid business and their affection for Danielle Labelle. In the rest of her 911 call, she clearly identified who she thought was responsible.
Somebody shot him. I think they shot him.
David, of course, became a suspect at that time. Whether he knew it, he was definitely going to be a suspect.
Bieber would later be arrested and questioned, but all the time he'd be planning violent revenge against the very detective who was hunting him.
David said, well, if we're not going to kill him, we'll kill his sons. That'll be a way to get to him. We didn't know what David was going to do now, especially now.
Florida, 1995. The man who would later kill British PC Ian Broadhurst faces questions about the murder of fellow bodybuilder and steroid dealer Marcus Mueller. This is the first time that police interview has been heard.
Tell me about yourself, Marcus.
We were friends, but not real close friends.
How long have you guys been friends?
I actually met him probably almost a year ago when he first came into town.
Where did you meet
him? At the gym. You know, if I saw him in the gym or whatnot, hey, how you doing? What's up?
Did you kill this guy?
No.
He was calm the whole time, a little smirk on his face.
You got all the reason in the world to not like this guy.
Yeah, we smoothed everything out. I have no problem with him. I wish the guy was around. I don't like that y'all are trying to make me out to be a suspect, because I'm not.
Bieber may have helped arrange Mueller's murder, but he hadn't pulled the trigger. He was happy to let police take away his guns for forensic tests. And even happier when those tests proved negative and his guns were handed back to him.
You're just smiling, sort of posing. He was real arrogant, cocky in those photos. He was glad to get him back.
Although Lieutenant Futch had insufficient evidence against Bieber, he believed that he was involved.
I actually told him that I knew he was involved and that we were going to prove it. And eventually we would prove that he was involved in this murder. He just stayed calm the whole time. It was like, nope, you won't get me.
It took another 6 months and another shooting for Futch to get his chance. This time, the victim was an ex-girlfriend who managed to survive the gun attack. A tip-off led police to Bieber's criminal associate. Under questioning, he said he had arranged both shootings and he'd done it for Bieber.
David's talking to you about Mueller and how he'd like to have Mueller what? What's the word he used?
You're the middleman on all this, aren't you?
Futch was now convinced Bieber was guilty of arranging murder. And as the interview continued, he was led to believe that his suspect had another potential victim in mind.
Were y'all planning on hitting anybody else? You said you didn't want anybody else gone?
I mentioned you.
Why did he want to kill me?
Because what you were putting him through.
David Bieber was now a wanted man, but according to his friend, he'd kill anyone who tried to take his freedom away.
Top. You. What's the difference? I'm gonna find out.
That David actually was capable of hiring somebody to do it. I didn't know if somebody was stupid enough to do it. My kids left. I didn't leave for quite a while, so that they wouldn't be around here, because we didn't know what David was going to do now, especially now.
Bieber knew exactly what he was doing. When Lieutenant Futch went to arrest him, he had gone.
A lot of these strips, little strip malls, little bars within the strip malls, clubs, those are the type of hangouts that he would like, that he'd enjoy to hang out in.
Lieutenant Charlie Ferranti was responsible for tracking down fugitives like David Bieber.
He was attracted to places like that because of the women that were in those places. And it was basically a matter of constantly going, checking, showing up.
But despite his efforts, the closest Ferranti ever got to Bieber was this driving licence. The suspect had applied for it 8 months after he fled, and it showed he was already altering his image.
He had a little bit more weight. It looked like that he wasn't working out regularly at the time. His hair was permed rather than straight. So, I mean, he did try to, obvious that he did alter his looks.
If Bieber was going to evade the police, he needed a different name to go with his changed appearance. He searched graveyards for an identity to steal. The name he chose was Nathan Wayne Coleman, who had died in 1975 at the age of 6. Using the young boy's identity, Bieber successfully applied for a birth certificate and a passport. Along with a new name and a new image, he was able to head for a new country, Britain.
You're robbing an identity of a child who lost its life. He was that desperate to get out of here. I believe that everything he did was very well thought out.
All Bieber's meticulous planning paid off. For 8 years, he had evaded the American police.
What's your country of birth then? How long you been in country?
But in December 2003, his lies had finally caught up with him. West Yorkshire police now knew the man they wanted was not Nathan Coleman, but David Bieber. And all the signs were that he was trying to escape again. He'd already collected his guns, now he was getting his money. CCTV showed him visiting a series of banks across the north of England. And he was preparing to begin life in yet another different country.
We tracked down that he'd bought a ticket on the Eurostar to go to Paris a few days later, so his aim was to get into Europe. And from then, it would have been incredibly difficult to track this individual. This was a person already in the States who was a fugitive, who would have stopped at nothing, who'd been cunning and using guile to escape the States under a false name, under a dead child's name. We had to be up to the mark with this to get this guy.
December the 30th, 2003. Britain was gripped by the search for PC Ian Broadhurst's killer. A reported sighting had closed down York's railway station to allow police to search it. It was a false alarm. Bieber hadn't gone to York, he'd headed further north. The Royal Hotel stands on a quiet road just off the A1 near Gateshead.
You get to meet all sorts of people. You know, there's always different clientele coming and going. Basically just different sorts of people all the time coming and going.
It was almost empty apart from the manager, Vicky Brown. A couple of hours into her shift, she signed in a new guest.
He come in with big old-fashioned glasses and a big woolly hat. He just looked strange. I just felt as though he was very, not agitated, but he wanted to get away as soon as possible. He didn't want to hang about, he didn't want to talk. Normally I would go up to the room and open the door for them, but this particular time I wouldn't. I just stood at the bottom stairs and told him where to go. I wouldn't go upstairs with him. It was just something wasn't right.
Vicky was worried. She called the hotel's owners. Aware a killer was at large, they called the police.
All me phone, she says there's something queer about him, you know?
Right, so the staff there all night?
She's there, yes, she will be there, yeah.
And how long is he booked in for?
Just one night.
As Vicky waited for the police in the empty hotel, she realised she'd seen this man's face before.
There was newspapers behind the bar, so I just picked it up and I was reading through it, and obviously I got to this page and I seen that picture and the piercing eyes. I just remember thinking, looking at him, thinking that's the way he looked. Doesn't matter what angle you look at it from, they're just staring right through you. They're just piercing, they're dead. So I just got a pen and I thought, could it be him? So I sat and drew a pair of glasses onto the face and put like a beer towel over his head, and it looked very much like the guy that checked in. I just could not believe it, that I'm sitting down looking at this guy and he's like staring back at me, and it was like 10 hours previous when he was standing in reception staring at us. It was the same eyes. You know, what was he like? What background? What was he going to do?
Vicky was alone in a hotel with a desperate, dangerous man.
Just locked up everywhere. Went upstairs, locked myself in a room, and just kept waiting for the phone calls. Did he have any reason not to try and get away? You know, if they caught him, obviously he was going away for a very long time, so he had nothing to lose, basically. I was terrified. I was totally terrified. I smoked. It was Christmas, so when the heating goes off, the building cools down, so it creaks, and what's that noise? And I heard a noise which was inside the building. I thought he was coming down the stairs, and my knees buckled, and I gave me the give way. I fell on the floor.
But the noise wasn't Bieber. It was the police.
It is an unusual hotel to go to, but if you wanted somewhere quiet, you come to the right place.
And this time, they weren't taking any chances. A team of armed officers closed in on the room.
At one point, the door briefly opened. I firmly believe that he probably could have seen us, but we didn't see him.
7 long minutes passed. No one knew what would happen next.
I think that David Bieber weighed up his odds there. Can I get out of this hotel room alive? And I think he realised the answer to that question was no.
Bieber walks from the room.
We're going to lie down on the ground. You move his hands away from his body. You instruct the person that when we are going to search them not to make any sudden movements or they may be shot. And at that point he replied, you wouldn't shoot an unarmed man.
That just sums up the individual that we're dealing with. This is a person who has no thoughts of anyone but himself.
Bieber's hair was dyed bright ginger, yet another attempt to disguise himself from the police. But his 8 years of hiding and scheming were finally over, and now it was him who was at gunpoint as he was taken to a high-security police station.
I could not believe that this man had been arrested and nobody else had lost their life. It was absolute relief. David Bieber shot and killed 1 unarmed officer and nearly killed 3. So that's the measure of David Bieber.
Back in Bieber's room, the gun that killed P.C. Broadhurst was hidden under the mattress, and it was loaded, ready to be fired. With it, 200 rounds of ammunition, enough to cause carnage.
He was prepared for anything, and he would have shot his way out of there had he been given a chance.
But that wasn't all. There were 4 American birth certificates in different names, a set of passport photos and a list of names, all from the UK, all people who had died.
He was using everything in his guile and craft and cunning to avoid capture, and he'd successfully done it from America. He was looking to do it as well from his latest crime here in England.
David Bieber stood trial for murder in November 2004. By the end, one of Britain's and America's most wanted men was behind bars. He was jailed for life and will never be released.
It wasn't enough. It doesn't bring Ian back. It doesn't take the pain away from the rest of Ian's family and friends. We still don't get Ian back at the end.
But even in his cell, Bieber's still plotting. Locked inside Britain's most secure jail, there's only one thing on his mind.
Everyone talks about escape. There was no ifs. Bieber wanted to get out, and that's the difference with him. He's obsessed with escape.
David Bieber has been behind bars since December the 2nd, 2004, the day he was convicted for the murder of PC Ian Broadhurst. The judge told him that in his case, life means life. But Bieber's no ordinary inmate. As a free man, he plotted and schemed to get his way out of trouble. As a prisoner, he's determined to find his way out of jail.
The more it sunk in that he was never getting out of there, that's the more desperate he got.
Soon after he was jailed, Bieber struck up a friendship with another prisoner who was awaiting extradition for alleged crimes in South Africa.
His name was well known through the newspapers. I said, "Oh, you must be David Bieber." And he says, "Yeah." I said, "You're the guy that was involved in the killings of the police up in Yorkshire." "Yeah, that's me."
In the following months, Bieber's new cellmate began to notice some changes.
He hated it. You could see it was mither in him. When I knew him, he was very depressed. And he did say to me, "You know, I prefer to die escaping than die in prison." He said, "You know, he always said I've got nothing to lose."
Bieber was so desperate he began planning an escape. He found out that his new friend had served in the army, that he'd travelled all over the world, and that he'd been trained in how to use a gun. Bieber decided he was the perfect person to help him escape.
As the months went on, the more detailed he got and the more desperate he got. Every time he came to the cell, the conversation was on escape.
In April 2007, all the charges against Bieber's cellmate were dropped and he was allowed to go free. Several weeks later, he received a phone call. It was to be the first of many.
His first words were, "Hey, man." And then straight away he went into the conversation of, are you still able to help me with my appeal? Which he started using as a code name for his escape. Some of the conversations would be just a few minutes. Other conversations, I think I've spoke to him for nearly 40 minutes. And I even spoke to him at one stage, and I could hear the door shutting, coming along the line, shutting, and the screw shouting for people to go in. So he obviously had the phone in the cell with him.
Bieber may have thought he had an ally, but his ex-cellmate was also playing a game. He knew there'd be people interested in the escape bid of a police officer's killer. Instead of helping him, he used their conversations to gather evidence to sell to the tabloid press.
Actually, they've just put more up. But what it is around me outside, it's literally a 5-meter gap.
8 years on the run had taught Bieber to plan everything, and he wasn't stopping now. He gave a blow-by-blow account of how to get into the prison.
Even if you had to, there's still little holes here and there.
And detailed an astonishing and well-thought-out plot that he thought would give him his freedom.
The plan was for an helicopter to fly in. We wanted a gun attaching to the rope so that if anybody tried to stop him when he was below, he was able to shoot. Then he wanted dropping off as soon as possible over the wall. He wanted dye for his hair. He asked about false passports and driving licenses. He had a series of cars he wanted laying on so he could get to each car and make his way up to Scotland. His plan was to lay low there for a while, then get a boat round the coast of Scotland all the way round to Ireland. And I believe it was in Ireland that he said he would have plastic surgery done as soon as possible to change his appearance.
You need to be ready to lay down some fire if you had to.
And Bieber's plan made it clear that he was a man who would stop at nothing to get his freedom back.
He was obviously desperate, and he'd do anything to get out of there. And he will kill and expected me to kill, which puts him a threat above most any other prisoner I ever met in prison.
You know, it's my last name, don't you? A-I-E-B-E-R.
Only Bieber himself knows why he was sitting in his car with a gun on that Boxing Day, or why he decided to kill PC Broadhurst. But those closest to Ian are now left living with the tragic consequences of those actions.
What if, you know, you can ask yourself that question forever, what if I'd have turned left? You know, I didn't, I turned right. And the things that happened, and there's not a thing I can do to change them.
He's taken everything away from me. He took away my whole world. And I've had to now try and rebuild that by myself, without Ian in it. How do you do that?